A somber President Zelenskyy at a memorial today for just some of those who have died defending Ukraine. On a day many of their countrymen may be wondering what they died for. Zelenskyy must decide, and quite soon, whether he can possibly accept a peace plan cooked up between Washington and Moscow that would carve up his country, give the Russians land they have failed to conquer, and bar them from NATO forever. No wonder, when he addressed his nation, he spoke of impossible choices. The pressure on Ukraine is among the heaviest it has ever been, he said. Ukraine may soon face a very difficult choice, either the loss of dignity or the risk of losing a key partner, either a complex set of 28 points or an extremely difficult winter, the hardest one yet. The 28-point peace plan, handed to them without discussion by Washington, includes agreement to surrender the Donbass, Crimea and further territory in the south, to limit their armed forces to 600,000 personnel, to agree never to join NATO, and to drop any claims of war crimes committed by Russia. European leaders have, like the Ukrainians, been completely excluded from crucial decisions about the continent. At the G20 summit in South Africa today, their talk of standing up for Ukraine is running into a brutal and very uncomfortable reality.
Well, I've just had a call with President Zelenskyy alongside President Macron and Chancellor Merz, and that was an opportunity for us to express again our support for Ukraine and the principle that's very important, which is all matters to do with Ukraine must be determined ultimately by Ukraine.
Zelenskyy, whose relations with Vice President J.D. Vance have often been tense, spoke to him for an hour today as Washington keeps the pressure on Kiev. But the big unknown at this stage is whether Vladimir Putin will accept these terms. He indicated today that he's not rejecting them. I believe they could form the basis for a final peace settlement, he said, but this text is not being discussed with us in any substantive way. The plan gives him much of what he wants, but not all. And until now, despite the pressure from a sympathetic Donald Trump, he's preferred to keep fighting than settle for half a victory. James Mates, News at 10.
Well, Dan is in Washington for us this evening. Good evening to you, Dan. And President Trump has been speaking tonight, hasn't he? Did he give any sense that he's in the mood to negotiate with Ukraine?
Well, he didn't really, no. I mean, he was asked about this 28-point plan, which is, many people think, is heavily tilted towards Russian war aims. He was asked about this in the Oval Office in the last hour or so, and asked specifically, Paul, about whether he would withdraw support from Ukraine if Ukraine didn't accept this plan in its entirety. He dodged that specific question, but here's what he did have to say.
Well, at some point he's going to have to accept something. You know, he hasn't accepted. You remember right in the Oval Office not so long ago, I said, you don't have the cards. Don't forget, I inherited this war. I would have never, this war never would have happened. I inherited this war.
One of the big repercussions for Ukraine, obviously, would be the withdrawal of US military hardware, things like Patriot missiles, which have made such a difference to countering Russian drones, but also intelligence sharing as well, which has been critical. But what President Zelenskyy is being asked to accept is pretty unpalatable. I mean, effectively, almost halving the size of his army, giving over to Russia not only huge swathes of territory in the Donbass, but also entire cities as well. And there's a lot of mounting evidence that this plan, in fact, has been effectively and literally authored by Russia, suggestions that it's been literally translated from Russian, that it has been put forward by Kirill Dmitriev, who is the head of the Russian Sovereign Wealth Fund, who's been down in Florida talking to Steve Witkoff. It exposes, I think, a bit of a rift within the Trump administration between Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, on one hand, and those who are much more keen on just getting a peace deal no matter the cost, people like J.D. Vance and Steve Witkoff, and now Dan Driscoll, the Army Secretary, a new rising star in the Trump administration.